Hello everyone, my name is Dexter Thillien and I'm the lead analyst for technology and telecoms at the IU, which is part of the Economics Group. Welcome to today's session of the General Counsel Summit Insight Hour, ready for anything, preparing in-house legal team for the AI revolution, sponsored by Thomson Reuters. Ever since OpenAI launched ChatGPT in November 2022, every sector has been experimenting with generative AI and large language models, and the legal industry is no exception. In a sector when text and language are very important, but so is accuracy, how can a profession adopt this new technology without getting into major trouble? One example I'm thinking of is the lawyers in the US who used ChatGPT to write a brief. ChatGPT came up with fake precedent. The judge was not very impressed. So to discuss that, we'll be looking at kind of the use cases of generative AI today and tomorrow. What are the limitations of the technology? And obviously the broader impact the technology can have on the industry. And to discuss all of this, I am delighted to be with our four panelists. Our speaker will join me today. With us today, we have Maria Varsellona, who is Chief Legal Officer and Company Secretary at Unilever, Penny Dudley, Chief Legal Officer at Bupa, Gideon French, Group M&A Legal Counsel at ArcelorMittal, and Mark Cullen, Senior Director for Legal Tech Product Management at Thomson Reuters. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. So, Mark, I want to start with you. Basically asking, because obviously you're a bit different in terms of the other panelists, which are more practitioner and you provide the product. And I kind of want to ask you the question, you've been using AI for quite a while in terms of your product. So how much has generative AI and kind of a large language model been a difference in terms of the products you're giving to the legal industry in the last couple of years?
Yeah, thanks, Dexter. So as you say, at Thomson Reuters, we've been the practitioner of AI for decades, in fact. We have a substantial amount of people and AI practitioners. But with the advent of generative AI in the last sort of 18 months to 2 years, in a sense, that technology has been no exception. We've sort of leaned in hard, and we're starting to really see I suppose, an impact on our customers in the use of this technology. So we, in the legal industry, you mentioned it in your introduction, it's an industry of words. And so with generative AI, the difference, in a sense, is that it is generating content, new content, from what it's been trained against in the background. And so in an industry of words, of course, this has sparked a huge amount of interest from our customers. Can a machine, in a sense, draft a document, maybe a contract, in the way that a human can? So it sparked again that huge amount of interest, and really that is where we're seeing the value for our customers start to come through with generative AI in, for example, drafting a new contract. But it's not only the generative part that is interesting from our customer standpoint. It's also the kind of what we call the kind of bulk task that AI can tackle on the user's behalf. So let's take contract analysis. We have customers that explain to us that a 100-page contract might take an in-house lawyer somewhere between 1 and 4 hours to analyze and understand that contract. In the same vein, AI can read, contextually understand the same contract in about 3 minutes. As well as answering very accurately and very completely complex legal questions against that document. So if we compare that sort of 1 hour, the low end, 1 hour of the lawyer's time, compared to the 3 minutes that the AI takes to do that same task, the lawyer is 20 times faster in achieving the outcome that they're driving towards. So that, of course, from a productivity standpoint, which is really what the promise of AI is it's quite a step change, and again, this is where we're focused as a team, and again, where we're starting to see our customers realize real value from the use of this specific technology.
Yeah, so it seems, as I mentioned in my introduction, industry of word, obviously generative AI, large language models, very, very good with words, but so far, kind of the early use cases been on a efficiency, productivity type, and we're going to discuss those use cases with the panelists. So maybe if I want to start with you, Maria. Have you been using generative AI within kind of the legal sector or your legal division at Unilever?
Yes, we started pretty early to give the possibility to our team members to use generative AI. And in particular, all the team members have access to Copilot, the Microsoft tool. And then we have a group of 150 lawyers that are based in our hubs where we do, let's say, more basic legal work that can be done by more junior lawyers in our hubs in Bangalore, Barcelona, and Mexico City. We have about 100 lawyers that are using counsel for contract reviews, for contract drafting. And then we have another 50 lawyers around the world, but mostly in the United States, that are also using counsel. We see a clear productivity improvement, but the reason why we are using the tools is not to reduce headcount, but rather to have more time dedicated to more value-added activities. Our team members are always asked to do more, and they dedicate too much time to repetitive tasks. With the use of generative AI, they have more time to anticipate issues, partnering with the business, and also participating to negotiations, activities that in the recent years we were doing less and less because we are always asked to do more with less.
That's interesting in terms of, obviously there's more work, and it kind of reminds me, maybe it's not directly the same thing, but I did a webinar recently talking about AI in industry with cybersecurity, and we're saying on main issues that we don't have enough people. So maybe that's not the case in terms of lawyers, but it's kind of the flip side of that in terms of you asked to do more and more, and you only have a certain amount of labor hours or people that can work, and that becomes an issue. Penny, is it this kind of same use cases at Bupa, or do you have something a bit different?
Yeah, I suppose, I mean, taking a step back, one of the things that we've tried to do is think about what is it that would really help our teams in terms of making more of their time. And I think all of the points Maria makes about doing more with less are certainly true. I think the other thing that I'm sure is true for all of us in this discussion is that we have amazing people on our teams. We want to create amazing careers for them. We want to promote and protect our top talent that we have in our organizations. And so making sure that their roles are always engaging and that they're learning and developing as they move forward. So there's the talent retention piece of making sure that their roles are interesting and developing on a day-to-day basis. The other piece is thinking about, well, what is the nature of in-house work? And lots of people listening to this discussion will be clear about the distinctions. I myself know often questions are around, why did we do it this way? Is there anything similar that we've done in the past? Where can we find similar examples? So there's quite a lot of looking through things that have been done in the past. If we can save time with that, that's very helpful. There's obviously areas where we want to be more risk-based, where an answer that is fast is going to be preferable over one that is absolutely perfect, because there's time to refine as we go, making sure we have more time for that. And so really being thoughtful about where are the areas of productivity that we like to open up. In terms of the tools, I mean, we've mainly been using Copilot so far. We've also, in particular areas, in particular with our team in Australia, in our APAC business, they've made a lot of progress using bots and setting up front door areas for our in-house customers to be able to access services more easily. But we've also focused a lot more on democratizing AI use within the team. And so having a global focus on training, a global focus on toolkits, and a global focus on horizon scanning, because obviously there's lots of developments happening all the time in this space.
Yeah, and democratization is an interesting one, because that's basically what ChatGPT made kind of everybody aware that AI doesn't, you don't need to be a data scientist with a big PhD to use it properly, and that makes it quite interesting. Gideon, what has been the use cases in terms of ArcelorMittal?
So for us, we at the infancy stages to start testing AI as potential solutions within the legal team. We are looking at various options. Copilot is one of the options we're looking at, and as we probably will get further into this discussion, I think the research and development phase of implementing AI is a big step within any organization. It's quite time consuming. It takes trust to build up. It takes an IT infrastructure that needs to be set up. And AI has happened or has been part of the legal framework. I understand it's been something that there has been solutions out there, but the AI, the LLM models is quite new. And I think it's going to take time for the industry and industrial players to get used to it. So we are starting to explore certain options, and I think it's also quite important to distinguish between what AI implementation or AI models implementation for an industrial player would mean versus a law firm, for example. What I also understand is that law firms are starting to experiment quite extensively with AI, starting to roll out their own models, etc. But I think at the end of the day, the AI revolution, which has got its genesis in the 1950s, 1960s, that we all probably know about that. It's probably one of the most exciting, innovative developments that we have seen in the let's say the past few years. I think what AI is going to do for us as an industry, particularly in the legal field, it's going to give not just us, but I think the people in general access to law, cheaper law, and quicker law. And I think from a legal perspective or from a lawyer's perspective, from an in-house perspective, we're going to have to stand back and think what that will mean for us as lawyers, as service providers for our internal clients, and also as law firms. The LLM models is quite an interesting development for us to think about, and there's a lot of complexities that we need to start considering. We need to start thinking about the confidentiality impact of this type of services. We need to think about privacy. We need to also think about how this will also impact mental health and how it will actually impact the lawyers itself. I think there's two factions here. There's excitement and there's fear. And we as legal leaders need to think about how do we roll this out, how do we implement this, and how do we take care of people at the end of the day.
Yeah, and we'll come back to the potential limitation and the potential drawbacks and I guess pushback that can happen. I mentioned the hallucination at the beginning. What I wanted to kind of maybe move on a bit is that obviously large language models, the way they work is a lot by prompting. And I would say, so I'm not a lawyer, I'm not a legal professional, but I would say prompting is about asking questions. And I'm guessing that legal professionals are pretty good at asking questions. So is it, I guess, an easy skill to master, the kind of prompting element in terms of getting the right answer for a legal professional, maybe to compare to other industry? Or do you still feel that even with your background and with your kind of your skill set, you still need to learn to answer question the way, I guess, a large language model wanted the question to be asked, which might be different than asking question in many other ways you do the law? Maya, maybe if I want to start with you on that, and then Gideon. Yeah. Maya, yeah.
Yeah. So prompting clearly is a new skill that we are all developing. In my team, we have regular chats to which all team members can participate, in which basically there is a sort of context, a competition on the best way, for example, to use Copilot. And it's unbelievable how much you can extract from these tools if you really ask the right questions and you manage them in the right way. However, I believe that this is a task, a competence that you acquire. We do training, which is pretty basic training that is provided by the same suppliers of the various tools. But in addition to that, it's really the experience that you gain using these tools every day. You always get to the outcome. The matter is how long do you take? Because if you are not good at prompting, you end up spending a long time asking over and over again the same sort of question to get to where you want to be. So it's an efficiency gain that you have if your team is properly trained in prompting the tools. Right now, it's really more a pull rather than a push exercise that we are doing. And I have to say that this is bringing fantastic results. Just a few days ago, we had a legal live and the CEO was our guest. And he asked questions to the team regarding the use of artificial intelligence, because it seems that we are the team that uses these tools the most at Unilever right now. And it was so impressive to see how many use cases, how much enthusiasm there is there, because the team doesn't feel artificial intelligence and in general generative AI as an enemy, because there is a clarity of the reason why we are using it. And also they feel pretty much protected, because we are not delegating anything at this point in time to generative AI to work on its own. We are always reviewing. We have lawyers reviewing whatever the Gen AI tools produce. Because, of course, as we all know, at this point in time, there are still risks. So the enthusiasm from the team, the pull that comes from the lawyers, especially in the powerhouses, it's helping us to move really, really fast.
Yeah. Gideon, you wanted to intervene as well?
Yeah, and I think, Dexter, prompting is going to be a critical element of lawyers using AI efficiently and effectively. And at the end of the day, what we are trying to gain out of these tools is the efficiency gain. So prompting, like I said, is going to be quite important, and it's good to see and good to hear from Maria's perspective that that's the type of programs that they're already implementing. I think any company that is foreseeing to implement some form of an AI tool within their company is going to have to invest some time, of course, in the development, the IT infrastructure, and also training. And I think one of the training elements would be prompting. I think as lawyers, asking the right legal question in the right legal format comes to a degree naturally. I think we as lawyers are I wouldn't say better equipped, but this is part of our training and part of our background. So the more efficient we will become with prompting, the better it will become. But it's like Maria said, this is definitely a skill set that will have to be developed throughout the whole infrastructure or development of AI, that people will have to become more comfortable and better with. At the end of the day, what AI is going to do is going to try to simplify legal tasks. It's going to simplify legal research. The LLM models are specifically there for legal research and legal drafting. So those elements are very, very important. So if you are able to ask the right questions, it's like any other thing. If you ask the right questions, you'll get the right answers. But with generative AI, it's going to become a more critical element as well. So prompting is going to become a skill set that people will have to develop. And the interesting thing about this, as a lawyer, and this is something we're probably not always motivated to do. And if you look at the IT side of it, people's going to have to be motivated to play, motivated to experiment. Because if you don't do that, you're not going to develop. And I think as soon as people realize the power that they can generate out of these tools, the more enthusiastic they're going to be to start doing this. So prompting is one thing, but also people need to be motivated to actually do more, experiment with it, play with it. And those skill sets will slowly start to develop.
Yeah, Mark, go ahead, please.
Sorry, Dexter. Yeah. If I may just agree firstly with both Gideon and Maria on I think the legal industry is really well set up as, again, an industry of words and an industry of questions. I think it's really well positioned. And I would go further and say I see sort of prompting as a potential new branch of legal knowledge management. So think about the reuse of prompts, good efficacy, good structure and good question and answering in the form of a prompt, as Gideon said, gets good results, so high efficacy. It's the same sort of thing if you think about the storage, use and reuse of preferred precedent or contract language in the legal industry. We have playbooks, we have sort of prompt libraries you could see coming out. And as Maria described, if there's a sort of community of practice type of feeling within a company, that, again, if there's a way in which one user or a group of users is getting really good outcomes from the use of a particular way of prompting or the like, if that knowledge and that learned experience of using the tools can be bottled in some way and then democratized, to use a word that we've already used here. I think that's very, very powerful. And again, I truly liken it to a new form of IP to some extent via the bottling and of knowledge management within a law firm. So I do believe the law industry is set up to be very successful in this regard.
Yes, Maria, please go ahead.
Yes, basically, I wanted to reinforce what Mark just said regarding the legal industry and the fact that it is one of the industries where the use of generative AI is recognized as a tool that will improve the way in which we work. And it's one of the professions that is asking to the various producers of tools based on large language models, the implementation. I have been to the Silicon Valley with the leadership team of Unilever to visit Meta, Google. We went to see also Microsoft and many other companies, including NVIDIA. And it was pretty clearly stated by all the leaders of these companies that the profession that is requesting AI the most is the legal profession, because the advantages that it can bring to our profession are really, really clear. Of course, there are many risks, or of course, we need to be cautious, but I really encourage my team to experiment and use it as much as possible, because clearly it can make a big difference.
And that's an interesting kind of insight in terms of everybody's been talking about using generative AI for the past 2 years. We've talked about coders, we've talked about marketing, we've talked about many other industries, but maybe we don't talk enough about lawyers kind of using it. And it kind of leads me my next question, that it's been about 2 years, just under 2 years since ChatGPT. Obviously, the technology is developing. Where do you see it, I guess, going forward? Do you have, I guess, a pathway over the next 12 to 24 months where you see yourself using the technology to do different things, new things, or is it going to be doing more of the same, but in a better way? Maybe Penny, if I want to start with you, do you have kind of a pathway in terms of, are you thinking about using generative AI for the next year or so?
It's a great question, Dexter, and if I knew the answer to that, I'd obviously be doing something even more exciting than my current role. Look, I think, like a lot of new things, I think it's good to be excited about it, but it's also important to be a realist. I suppose a mindset that we have is that over the next 2 years, we want to become much more proficient. We want to test, we want to learn, we want to try, but probably don't see sort of seismic changes happening within this next 24-month period. In 10 years, obviously, what we do is going to be very different. So I think the question for us is, what should we be doing now that helps us be more ready for what could happen in 10 years? And obviously, we can't predict that at this stage. I want to keep coming back, though, to where I want our team to have confidence. And one area where I'm really confident in our team is in their learning agility. I think a great element of in-house professionals. And I'm sure when we all talk, we're not just talking about the lawyers in our team. We have privacy professionals, we have insurance professionals, security professionals, assistants, paralegals, huge groups of people, all of whom are very good at turning their mind every day to a new situation and asking some questions to quickly get to an understanding of that situation and then trying to find a solution to the problem. So it very much for me is around building confidence with the team that this is something that will help to augment their roles, that will make them even more effective in the roles that they do, and that will partner with them to be better into the future. And I think if you can have that confidence and that mindset about the how, then the what is less of an issue.
Yes, absolutely. And I think that's kind of very interesting. And we'll see. I mean, even I don't know as a tech analyst what the technology will look like in 10 years. Again, if I knew, I'd probably be in Silicon Valley doing something else. So it's very, very difficult, but it will definitely change, and it will obviously have an impact on the industry, not just the legal sector, but every sector going forward?
Said, I think it's also important that we look at other industries where big changes have happened. I mean, I have read in some materials that, you know, AI is to lawyers what Excel originally was to finance professionals. I don't think many of us have seen a reduction in financial professionals over time. If anything, there's always more and more. So I think it's also important that we have a mindset which is, what does this make even more possible, and what are the opportunities that come from this? I think it's definitely possible that this brings, you know, a lot more positivity than risk for the team.
Yeah, Gideon.
Yes, now maybe just to add to Penny's point, I think AI would create new roles, new opportunities, and I think it's quite an important thing to just maybe pause and look into it. At the end of the day, lawyers are there to assess risk, and anything new that comes in carries risks. And as a first port of call, the lawyers will be there to assess it and to put in guardrails and to put in frameworks. And if you start now looking at what the law firms are doing, the law firms are starting to roll out AI specialist teams. You get your IP lawyers, your privacy lawyers, your copyright lawyers, your litigants, your transaction lawyers. They all look at it from a different lens and say, how's this going to work and how's this going to fit in? All those skills that's been gained through other forms of legal experience are now becoming relevant for AI as well. And I think a new subset of lawyer is going to appear in the horizon, dealing specifically with AI and AI-related risks. And while I think everybody is grappling to understand what the framework, what the compliance framework will have to be for AI, I think there's opportunities, and something that needs to be embraced. It's like Penny says, it's like Excel was for financial professionals, where AI is going to be for legal professionals. This is LLM models, and this is our bread and butter. This is not something we should be wary about. This is something we should embrace and see how we can use that to make things more efficient. Yes, it's going to start taking or doing work that lawyers have traditionally done in the past, but I think what it will also do is it will leave space for the more complex legal questions. And I think what AI cannot do at this point in time, it cannot remove the emotional part of humanness. And that will always be quite relevant in large litigation matters or complex deal negotiations. You need to have the element of sympathy, reading individuals, reading a situation. And I think it may happen in the next few years when AI may start developing that type of ability. But I think in the short to medium term, that skill is going to be very important. And just to roll on to that, I think lawyers is going to have to start looking at things differently and training differently. So it's not only going to be IQ, it's going to be EQ as well. It's going to become important for legal professionals to develop together with data analysis type of skills. So that's where we are moving towards, I think.
Yeah. Mark, you wanted to intervene?
Yes, I'd like to sort of underscore the positivity that Gideon and Penny both expressed, as opposed to the kind of doomsday scenario, which tends to fill the headlines and tends to, I would say, distract and doesn't feel very helpful, honestly, in the emergence of new technology. I think it's a very human thing to be cautious or wary about the impact of, again, a machine, in a sense, that can do things that traditionally only a human can do. But again, just to underscore the positive bias that my fellow panelists are sharing, the change historically, if we just purely look to history, and actually The Economist has commented on this quite widely, the change of the magnitude that AI is spoken about doesn't tend to happen sort of overnight. And in the legal industry, I think that's clear. It's not going to be an overnight change. And so already we will see, as Gideon describes, new roles emerge, new tasks emerge. And generally speaking, that will, in a sense, backfill or offset what might be, in a sense, taken away. And the promise of AI, and what we're starting to show and see, is it's removing work that, honestly, we don't really need or want to do anyway. We don't want to do the low value. We want to move our legal professionals up that value chain. It's the reason that people study law, is to really get into the complex negotiation, nuance, litigation, that sort of work that lawyers want to do. And then to speak to what we spoke about earlier, Penny was describing the concern around retention and growth of people. That's the work they want to be doing. So let's allow AI technology to automate or take away some of those low-level tasks so we can move up that value chain. And just to balance my point, I think it is naive to think that these tasks, sort of these lower-level tasks, and maybe sometimes roles in the economy won't be fully removed. But again, the pace of change should allow for new roles to emerge. I don't think 2 years ago, 3 years ago, we'd ever spoken about a prompt engineer as a role within a technology team. And of course, that is now something that's relatively or becoming more commonplace. So again, that change can happen at a pace at which the industry, in a sense, can soak it up, and everyone moves up the value chain.
Gideon.
Yeah, Dixon, I think something we also should not forget about the whole AI evolution as well is the impact on the population at large as well. Whilst it may make lawyers in-house more efficient, law firms more efficient, that will definitely be the case. But we need to think about what's the impact on the man on the street. With the AI revolution, will it make law more accessible to the general guy that doesn't understand law as lawyers would? We need to think about what, on a day-to-day basis, how these people will interact with AI as well, because I think AI in the legal sphere is not exclusive to lawyers. It's going to roll out a step further. It's going to be further implemented in courts. We've seen in COVID how video conferencing and court hearings were held online, documentation production, and just simple resolution of disputes that normally the man on the street would not have understood, how AI is going to help those types of issues being resolved as well. And it'll be interesting to hear from the panel how they feel about the impact of AI on the general public.
Yes, but maybe at the risk of being the negative one on the panel, we probably still need to talk about some of the risk and some of the limitation of the technology and how you deal with that, because obviously, as you all mentioned, it can help with kind of a low valued work and, you know, those type of things that can do certain tasks that maybe more experienced lawyers don't want to do. But there are still some limitation to generative AI. I mean, hallucination is, I think, a very interesting word to say when it gets something wrong. There's obviously, if you're a law firm, issues in terms of privacy, security, maybe others. So while I get the impression from, I mean, the discussion so far that there hasn't been a lot of pushback from, I guess, the non-legal part of your business in terms of you using generative AI. And if I'm wrong, please tell me. There is still a limitation that you need to deal with on a day-to-day basis. So I guess maybe that's a question for Maria. That how do you deal in terms of, you know, there's issues happening. How do you deal with those issues? And, you know, how do you make sure that using more technology doesn't lead to any problems in terms of the output, I guess?
This is a very important point. Of course, like everything new, generative AI will get regulated. You know, we have already regulation in the EU, but we are going to have regulations all around the world. So we have to be very, very careful, especially when it's used for marketing. You know, we have hundreds of use cases in my company, and we have instituted a sort of review board, which I am a member, in which we authorize that each kind of use case for generative AI, because you have to take into account so many elements of risk that are related to the use of generative AI. So basically, we consider privacy issues, we consider intellectual property issues. There are a very, very big number of aspects that you need to analyze before you authorize the use of generative AI, especially for a big corporation where, of course, breaching regulations for us would be really bad from reputational standpoint, economical standpoint. So we need to be careful from that angle. this doesn't mean that the speed of implementation should be hindered. So we really perform our analysis at very high speed, and when we have to say no, we will say no. We try to find solutions, as always, rather than just saying no. And I have to say that so far this has been possible, but we are a very highly ethical company, so we will not allow the use of generative AI for certain purposes, especially within marketing. And we have said it externally very clearly. So that's a very, very important point. If we then look at the legal profession, quite frankly, in our area, the risks are less than in other areas. They are lower if you have lawyers reviewing. For now, we still have lawyers reviewing what the machine is doing. In the future, when generative AI will be even more reliable, most probably we won't have it. A big impact that I expect in my team workload is when finally, hopefully in the beginning of next year, or let's say by mid-year next year, the various tools will be able to also redline contracts. Right now, you get summaries, you get highlights of the deviations, but you have to do your own redlining. In the moment when finally our suppliers, and I look at the colleague here on the screen, are going to give us a redlining capability, that will have a big, big impact. And of course, we will have to make sure that the team members still, for now, control that workload, work product, because the temptation will be very high to take it and send it to the other side.
Penny, I saw you raising your hand. Do you have, I guess, a similar kind of a standard and governance in place in terms of are you using generative AI for your work?
Yes, we do. Thanks, Gideon. At an overall level, there's probably a few things to mention. One is remembering the context in which we're doing our work. We're a global healthcare company, and I think when it comes to healthcare, it's relatively clear from the view of the general public and from articles that you can read out there in the market that certainly AI is something that can augment that experience, but that no one yet is in a position where they're saying, I'd very much like my healthcare to be completely abdicated to AI, and I would only like to interact with that kind of technology in terms of something that's so important to me. So I think to that extent, do people feel comfortable working with AI when it comes to looking after their loved one's health? No. Do people feel comfortable working with AI so that a doctor can write notes more quickly and therefore have more time to see patients? Absolutely. So I think it depends where in the value chain the activity is happening. From our perspective at the moment, our use cases, there are lots of them, but they are quite honestly all in lower risk areas of the business, and in particular in the productivity zone, which is, enables us to do quite a lot more. I think also the technology has the usual issues of early stage developments. I'm sure anyone who's read meeting notes from a recording will have plenty of edits that they've had to make to those. The team often tells me that the technology's ability to produce good quality slides is very limited, and that's been my experience as well. But all of these things will come with time, and I'm sure it'll get faster. Back to Maria's point, we've got a set of principles that we follow in terms of our AI use cases to make sure that the way that we use them accords with our purpose and our values as an organisation. And at this point in time, we're absolutely insistent in a human always being in the loop.
Gideon.
Yes, and I think just to add to these points, I think what both Maria and Penny is saying is that data integrity is going to be the utmost important factor here to monitor. And I think an over-reliance on AI could risk that the human intervention is no longer there, and that's how the data gets tested. And to just get back onto what an hallucination is, that's when there's biased data that's been fed into the LLM model, and a convincing answer is then produced by the machine, which people then rely upon. For example, the US case, and I think there's been a case now lately in Manchester as well. So at the end of the day, I think what's really going to protect the integrity of these systems is that there's always going to be human involvement that reviews the systems, that reviews the answers, that reviews the output at all times. And as that develops, the prompts, the output will also just become better and better and better. And I think from a company's perspective, once AI tools rolled out, there should be a task team set up at all times to monitor what the output is and what data gets inputted into the system to ensure that the output always remains unbiased.
Yes, absolutely. And maybe if I want to get to Mark, because from a product perspective, how do you make sure that you understand those limitations and those potential risks in terms of the product you're kind of putting out? Yes, or do you think about that? Because obviously that's a very big part, because if your product is not up to scratch, then nobody's going to buy it. So I'm sure it's a very, very important of your work.
It absolutely is, because it comes down to the word trust, right? Ultimately, our users trust us or entrust us and the software we use to help them do their jobs better or more effectively, efficiently. And if that trust is eroded by hallucination, by whatever means, that's a very difficult thing to rebuild. So we take trust and the ethical use of any technology, but particularly AI, very, very seriously. And it's a company principle that we will apply this technology in a fair and ethical and trustworthy way. In terms of how we achieve that, I mean, from a technical perspective, it's just a staggering amount of testing. So both machine-based testing, automated testing, but it's also, as everyone I think on the panel has agreed so far, the human in the loop is just as important from a technology vendor's perspective as it is by the practitioner that is using the technology and holding the pen ultimately, as I think everyone again has described on the panel. So we again have what I would class as an army of people who are working to ensure that what the AI is providing our customers, even before it goes to our customers, is again can be very trusted. Now, generative AI has this ability to convincingly make things up, and that is, in a sense, one of the beauties of this technology is that it can reference from outside its data set, outside its training set. Like hallucination has been portrayed as a bug, as opposed to what it really is, which is a feature of this technology that allows it to do the staggering things that it can achieve. However, it is a bug when a lawyer relies on it too heavily and then goes into a courtroom with citations that have been fabricated. So that can't happen. And again, I put that on the human as opposed to the technology. But again, it doesn't mean that us as a technology provider, we can just say, well, it has to be the human, it's the lawyer that's using that has to hold the pen and therefore they're accountable. I think it's really incumbent on us to ensure that both the testing that I've described is rigorous, but also the sort of safeguards that are wrapped around that and the information that goes alongside that to say, to remind the user of the underlying technology and what it is, that it is fallible to some extent. And so we have to arm our users with that knowledge. But again, the human in the loop is critical when it comes to the legal industry, because decisions can be made, advice can be given, and if it's based on a faulty foundation, it can have serious business consequences. And so again, we're very much as a vendor focused in this area and being a trusted partner to our customers.
Trust, humans, some things don't change no matter what the technology evolves, I guess. And I guess kind of I'm going to go to our kind of final part, which is kind of looking at the broader issues in terms of, Gideon's already mentioned, in terms of the non-legal side of things. I think we all agree that we're still going to have lawyers, no matter how good the technology becomes. Maybe some people are not too happy about that, but I'm not one of those. We're still going to have lawyers. But the work of a lawyer will change, like the work of many, many other industries and sectors will change. My work has changed in the last 15, 20 years. I'm sure your work has changed as well in the time you've been legal counsel, general counsel, or even product manager. So I guess my question is, going back to if we if we take it as a given that technology is far more in terms of augmentation as opposed to replacement, that work is changing, I guess a couple of questions. We already touched on it, but I was reading, there was kind of a recent survey saying that over 60% of legal professionals saying they were spending up to 7 hours a week, so one full day probably, or 1 day a week, analyzing and tracking regulatory development. And of almost 3/4 of those were anticipating that this was going to increase going forward. So how important is technology going to be in terms of dealing with the extra work you'll have to deal with? Maybe Maria, if I want to start with you on that.
So I believe that technology is already very important. In my team, there is a group of lawyers that is part of the legal operations, and they have been in charge of automating and making our tasks more simple already since before generative AI. We had already AI in the past, and we believe that if we want to stay aligned with the times, we must really try the new technologies and implement them. Now, technology is becoming even more important if you want to be efficient. And you know that CEOs always benchmark you with other teams. So if you want to stay ahead of the game, you really need to implement technology as soon as you feel comfortable that it's reliable. So it's very important. We said already in earlier today that there are new skills that are necessary for some team members, but quite frankly, I believe they are necessary for all team members because we mentioned the comparison with Excel. I don't think you can be a finance leader and not know how to use Excel. And I believe that this will be the same for the legal professional when it comes to prompting. You cannot be a good lawyer and don't know how to prompt. Otherwise, it's like right now you wouldn't know how to type. So I think these new skills will be necessary for everyone to develop. And that's the reason why I'm pushing so much my team to put themselves out of their comfort zone and use the tools already now.
In terms of those new skills happening, we've mentioned a lot the human element, the human in the loop. What do you think those skills are? And maybe that's a question for Penny. What are the new kind of, I guess, soft skills or human-centric skill that a lawyer now needs or legal counsel now needs that maybe needed less 5-10 years ago?
It's a good question. I'm not sure that they're new skills, but I think it's a matter of emphasis more than anything else. I think that, taking your question, for example, about new regulation, I think there's going to be lots of different ways that AI can help us get on top of that, identify what might be relevant, pick out core points. But again, I think the in-house professional's ability to synthesize those ideas, communicate them very clearly, and be able to really be specific about the so what is important. And that's been important, throughout my in-house career, and I think will continue to be important into the future. And it's probably difficult for me to see how AI would do that as powerfully and as quickly and in a sufficiently influential way that a human can do. So I think it's very much around, again, back to that point on building that confidence that the teams have got these skills. It's a matter of turning them up, potentially giving them some space to make sure that skills like prompting, skills like trying and learning from this kind of technology is something that we really encourage and give people space to do. But also being quite serious about learning these skills, that it's not something that is we're going to do when we get time to do it. We've set a metric for ourselves of having 90% of our global legal community attending our AI training program that we've put in place. We've put in place higher level training, including working with some higher institutions to give some members of the community an even higher level of knowledge and understanding of these particular developments. And so making sure that we always have a way for people to build their own confidence in this area, I think is really important.
Mark.
Yeah, I'd agree with what Penny says about it's not necessarily a brand new toolbox full of skills that lawyers don't have and then will sort of need to have. We've talked a lot about prompting, so I think that's as this technology comes into more and more aspects of our lives and in a sense takes more of those tasks away from us or helps us with those. I think prompting is maybe one of those obvious things, and it's one of those things that we can all dive straight in today and do so. The second thing I think from a legal perspective is, and what we hear a lot is our customers, in-house customers, they want time to think sometimes strategically. They want to be a value center and a strong strategic advisor to their business. They want to focus more on the commercial aspects of the business. They want to drive commercial decisions. So they want to adopt more of a sort of business acumen approach to their work. And generally speaking, they are pulled back from doing as much of that work as they would like to because of this kind of layer of task-based, reactive kind of work that is forced upon them. And of course, that is, as we've described, the more complex regulatory and compliance environment that we find ourselves in these days. That reactive task-based work is loading up. And somebody said it earlier today about doing more with less. The legal teams are generally speaking not growing in size. And so there's more work. There's a push to bring more work in-house as well, as opposed to working with an outside law firm. But the legal team is generally speaking not growing at the same time. So it truly is a more with less, but it's not just quantity. It is also complexity based on that regulatory and compliance background. So I do again believe there is a tipping point where technology can help the GC office truly move from that cost center, as it has been described and known historically, truly into a value center for its business.
Maria.
In this business partnering role that we have, what we are expected to do now, and we will continue to be expected to do later, it's a sort of risk-reward analysis in which judgment ends up being the most important skill. And with the use of AI, we have to find a way then to still have the opportunity to train junior lawyers, because in the past, junior lawyers would learn a lot about judgment calls that other more senior lawyers have made in reviewing documents. They would learn drafting, they would learn compiling summaries. Now that those tasks will be mostly done by the tools, by generative AI, how are we going to make sure that junior lawyers get that amount of exposure and training that is necessary for them to develop that capability to do a risk-reward analysis and judgment call in the right way? Because that will continue, irrespective of the development of technology, to be one of the most important skills for an in-house lawyer. So it's a question that law firms have to answer, but also us in-house, we have to think about how we are going to train our junior lawyers.
Gideon.
And maybe just to add to what Maria said, the legal landscape is changing, and as I mentioned before, companies and firms will have to think how they train lawyers for the future. But there's also an interesting opportunity for lawyers currently in the market that's been working for a few years. There's going to be an opportunity to start mentoring lawyers as well, because the skill that lawyers develop is by doing and seeing. And there's going to be less of doing that an old traditional lawyer would have experienced. And also the seeing is going to be very important, because as these lawyers move up in age and phase out, those skills is going to be very, very important to retain and to actually pass on to junior lawyers as well. So, as I mentioned before, the training model of training lawyers will have to be reconsidered, because it's not only about the data analysis, about legal research, it's also about training lawyers to have that specific skill, that specific instinct. And as a result of this, the lawyers currently where we are sitting now is going to stay relevant and also going to be important to train future lawyers with the advent of AI.
And maybe a final question, and I'm going to ask you to be quick, but do you feel that training, whether it's those skills that another machine is doing or the skills that you need for prompting, do you think that's something that needs to come from your company when you're hiring junior members of staff? Or do you think there is also a need maybe for law schools to change the curriculum and to start highlighting those skills even beforehand, even before somebody qualifies as a lawyer? Do you have a view on that?
I mean, we've always had the view that for the in-house team, about 80% of what they need to develop, they develop on the job. 10% we can do then through some sort of training program, and another 10% we might do extension work or see what else we can do to fill in those points. I'm sure there's lots of ways that law firms will expand their curriculums, but I think it's also pretty important that the core tenets of legal work is something that continues to be a focus for universities. I think in terms of what we need our teams to focus on, we've had good experience so far in making sure that we've adapted with our business. We focus on our end customers. We make sure we continue to move. And I come back to, having so much confidence in what I've seen my team do over time that I know they're going to be able to face this next horizon with lots of energy and lots of ability to succeed.
Gideon.
Yeah, I think the key to success of the implementation of AI is going to lie with leadership and how leadership embraces AI. It's going to be a continuous learning experience for everybody, and I think it's going to be very important for companies and law firms to provide the platform of expanding knowledge to have AI be successful. And yes, the legal profession is renowned for slow uptake on new developments, and I think the AI revolution is going to be one of those things that the legal profession will fortunately, unfortunately, have to run fast and adapt it very fast, because it is a new revolution. And it goes without saying, I think law schools will also start adapting their curricula and actually start implementing this type of training, because it's going to be critical for the future and for future lawyers' skill to be able to produce and to function in the legal environment.
Maria.
I think it's a matter of time, and universities must adapt, because, it's as if a university were saying, you cannot do your essays using a computer, you have to have it handwritten. They don't do that. So now it's not an immediate effect, but thinking it's forbidden to use generative AI for your tasks. No, basically the way in which the learning world will have to adapt is to consider there are new tools and you have to show your skills using the tools available. So it's a matter of time, in my opinion, and we will get there.
Finally, Mark.
On a similar vein to Maria, I'd say focus on the outcome. So if the outcome is achieved with the appropriate level of accuracy and is done so using technology, and therefore it's faster, then I don't think we should shy away from that. Again, it's still grounded in trust. I think that's a critical part that I'll sort of finish on, is it's grounded in trust. But if law schools, in a sense, are not awake to the fact that the law industry is evolving, and I'm sure the law courses have evolved over the course of time, way before technology became a sort of central part of the industry, then it of course needs to, and you can see already that legal technology based courses are part of said curriculum. And again, we shouldn't shy away from new technology in achieving what we need to achieve, so long as that trust is and accuracy is really the foundation on which we build.
Thank you. I'm afraid this is all the time we have for today. I think my takeaways would be that we still have lawyers going forward, but the job of a lawyer will be very different and will change. So far, most of the use cases in terms of generative AI are focused on productivity and efficiency, but this has also changed because we're still very, very early in the journey. And I'm guessing the human element and human skills will become even more important than they were, as the technology can start doing some of the more traditional tasks that lawyers would have done 10, 15, 20 years ago. I want to thank our panelists. I want to thank Thomson Reuters for sponsoring, and I want to thank the audience, you, the audience, for joining us today. Please see our other webinars and events on the Economic Impact website, and also our 2 upcoming in-person General Counsel Summits, one in New York in September and one in London in November. Goodbye, everyone, and see you again soon.